Trade of Hungary. And it's now my pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency Gilles Tonelli, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Monaco.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. In February 2018, Madam President Espinosa presented her strategic vision for the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly, quote, dialogue and strengthening multilateralism as a catalyst for the well-being of all people and a sustainable planet. We commend this commitment, seeing to, I quote once again, make the United Nations relevant for all, global leadership and shared responsibilities for peaceful, equitable, and sustainable societies. The delegation of Monaco will extend its support to see to it that together we can contribute to aligning our institutions with the Sustainable Development Goals so as to ensure that the high-level political forum which we shall hold here next year, that this forum will deliver the requisite adjustments to ensure full implementation of Agenda 2030. Dialogue and the promotion of multilateralism with a human face have also been priorities of her predecessor, Mr. Miroslav Lajcik. Under his presidency, the proceedings of the 72nd session of the General Assembly of the United Nations has led to significant progress so that United Nations decisions can remain relevant. I particularly wish to underscore the repositioning of the United Nations development system, but also the Global Pact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, which is to be formally adopted in Marrakesh in December. We warmly thank him for always having lent an ear to our representatives and for having prioritized the shared interest, which is a guarantor for success of multilateralism. Sir, as the General Assembly will commemorate on the 10th of December next, to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, how can we not recall the fact that, as is stated in the preamble, the reasons for which we, nations great and small, have committed to working together is to, I quote, promote the economic and social advancement of all peoples. I wish to take this opportunity to thank President Bachelet for having rightly taken up the torch of Prince Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. We assure her of our full support, and we congratulate Prince Zeid for never having avoided difficulties and for having assiduously championed human rights. Sir, the United Nations and its member states have consistently adapted to the new challenges spawned by violence, conflict, transnational organized crime, and the global scourge of terrorism. When the Security Council acts, it does so to ensure, on behalf of all states, to maintain international security and to ensure protection of civilians. When the Council is deadlocked, prevented from acting, civilians, specifically women and children, pay an even greater price. That said, can we fail to note the Secretary General's report, a report which states that armed conflict in 2017 led to 6,000 proven instances of violation perpetrated against children by government forces and 15,000 incidents of violence perpetrated by non-state armed forces. For this reason, during the 70th session of the General Assembly, Monaco joined the Code of Conduct so that the Council will not be prevented from acting in the event of mass atrocities. In that spirit, we strenuously condemn the attacks perpetrated against schools and hospitals. We condemn sexual violence and denial of access to humanitarian assistance. We firmly believe in the role of women in peace processes. We favor the involvement of young people in conflict prevention and resolution. On the basis of these convictions, Monaco has sponsored Security Council resolutions on these issues. As the Monegasque Red Cross commemorates its 70th anniversary this year, I wish to recall our commitment of the Principality to reinforcement of respect for international humanitarian law. We also wish to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all the men and women who have dedicated their lives to the organization, ceaselessly working to ensure that UN values can triumph. We honor United Nations peacekeepers and civil servants who fell while discharging their missions. The appointment by the Secretary General of an individual as a defender of victims' rights, tasked with placing rights and dignity at the heart of the efforts undertaken by the organization, and the zero-tolerance policy for sexual harassment are fully supported by my country. We also cherish the hope that the principle of the responsibility to protect, which is inscribed in the document from the 2005 summit, for this principle to finally be acknowledged and for it to be harnessed as a tool for progress embraced by all. Since joining the UN, Monaco has significantly stepped up its legal mechanisms and judiciary. Over the past 25 years, we've ratified, adhered to, accepted over 40 international treaties on human rights, refugees, privileges and immunities, criminal issues, disarmament, the environment, law of the sea, and we signed 8 of those. Today, less than 10% of the world's population lives below the poverty threshold. Nonetheless, at least millions of people, including women and children, continue to live below this threshold without access to education, health, a roof over their heads, and decent labor and opportunities for economic and social development. In a world where artificial intelligence is developing, where genetic engineering and cyberspace are realities for many of us, how can we disregard the fact that more than 68 million people have been displaced forcibly in 2017, and the United Nations have led assistance to a record 105 million people in 40 countries? Is it not unacceptable that 3 out of 10 people lack access to drinking water and 6 out of 10 people lack access to sanitation? The Central Emergency Relief Fund, which the Principality contributes to, has also financed emergency assistance in 36 countries to the tune of $412 million. Sir, the myriad crises and challenges to which I've referred are intertwined, as we know. In this vein, we adopted the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. However, what is the paramount challenge which our human societies face today? No doubt, that is climate change. Its systematic repercussions have spared no region in the world. They represent factors of geopolitical tumult which worsens inequality and conflict, which we have sought to combat here in this body. If we act today ambitiously and effectively to combat this scourge, it is incumbent upon us to prepare. If we fail to act, we will have to prepare to live on a shattered planet tomorrow. It will be difficult to maintain peace. Hence, I embrace the Secretary General's call issued earlier in the month to do away with paralysis, indifference, and tepid commitments in the light of climate change. Today, the term urgency is nearly obsolete, as has been recalled by the Secretary General. To avoid the world's worst, we need to change course by 2020. For this reason, it is imperative for COP24 negotiations in Katowice for this to lead to the adoption of rules, ensuring that the Paris Accord be made effective. For future generations, we need to rise to this challenge. Monaco has not been spared this observation nationally. The Pact for Energy Transition was initiated early this year. This is ambitious. The aim is to achieve the goal set out by His Highness Prince Albert II to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, following a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in 2030. This initiative is a new, tangible act undertaken by the government to tackle the goal set out in the Paris Accord. This pact is a partnership among all strata of society. This illustrates the willingness of the Sovereign Prince for Monaco to remain a land of innovation, all the more so if they can help to accelerate the transition to a carbon-free world. In this regard, we wholeheartedly welcomed the Secretary General's intent to convene a climate summit in 2019. Monaco will have several days prior to that hosted an IPCC meeting with a view to the publication of a report on the ocean and cryosphere in the context of climate change. Mr. President, there's an adage whereby there is no peace. There's no development without peace and no peace without development. This has constantly guided our work since the 1992 Rio Earth Summit through the development agenda. However, it is necessary to achieve the Agenda 2030, and progress has hitherto been uneven and slow. This is the adaptation to the challenges under Agenda 2030 is an important step to have a paradigm shift which will deliver on greater coherence, efficiency, visibility of the work of the organization, even though it is the primary duty of each member state to remain mobilized. In that regard, we also prioritize partnerships in international cooperation, given long-standing solid evidence. We cannot achieve concerted initiatives unless we leverage best practices and consider technical opportunities drawn from past experience. Our cooperation with local non-government organizations in partner countries is based on trust and involvement of the human being. The size of our land naturally leads us to look towards others. Trust in relationships has been built with 11 partner countries and this helps us to support 130 projects per year, exclusively through grants in priority spheres such as education, health, food security, and socioeconomic integration. The Principality remains a committed, determined partner. We seek to shoulder our responsibilities to adopt a new sustainable development paradigm to make this a reality for all. Mr. President, our faith in multilateralism is anchored in the reality of a world where threats are ever changing. The Principality of Monaco duly appreciates its responsibility through the principle enshrined in the United Nations Charter, namely one state, one voice. Monaco is persuaded of the fact that the United Nations alone remains a center where efforts of nations are harmonized towards shared goals. The authors of the Charter were visionary. Like them, we must consistently rekindle our commitment to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. To conclude, I wish to quote Seneca, who stated that it is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult. Given the proliferation of challenges, let us dare to stand together, even if not everything can be resolved within easily measurable timelines. Let us seek to achieve understanding among peoples and respect for our differences. It would be remiss of me to conclude without reiterating the full trust we place in His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, in his transformative initiatives which will make the United Nations better adapted and better positioned to effectively and efficiently tackle the challenges of tomorrow. Thank you for your attention.
Doy las gracias.
I would like to thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Monaco for his statement, and I would now like to give the floor to Her Excellency Marise Payne, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Australia.